I just wanted to make sure she'd arrived. I opened Find My and saw her headphones in a cheap motel on the New Jersey shore. And her mom, in Ohio. I stared at the screen long enough for the dots on the map to blur into one sick green smear. The rational part of me scrolled out, thinking maybe the phone was lagging. Maybe the coordinates were cached from some layover. But Jenny's AirPods were pulsing in real time against a block of faded motels 2 streets from the Atlantic. Her mom's iPhone, neat as always, was parked outside a retirement condo in Dayton, 700 miles west. We'd been together 3 years. Long enough for the daily good morning text to arrive without thinking. Long enough for me to know the smell of her shampoo before she opened the bathroom door. Long enough, apparently, to grow careless. She'd flown out the night before. Kiss on the cheek, promised to call after landing. I waited, but the call never came. At 11 a.m., I opened Find My, only because I worried her connecting flight had been delayed. And now I was staring at a cheap motel on the Jersey shore. I called her once. Straight to voicemail. I called her mom. She answered cheerful, asked if Jenny had landed yet. I mumbled something about a surprise and hung up. The emptiness in my chest wasn't hot, more like an elevator dropping too fast. I could have confronted her over text, but the thought of reading bubble-wrapped excuses felt insulting. So I requested a personal day, grabbed my duffel, and rented the first sedan I could afford. The drive from Philadelphia to Seaside Heights is just under 2 hours if you ignore the posted limits. I took the turnpike with the radio off, letting the hum of the engine drown out every memory that tried to surface. Our first date at Penn's Landing, the time she fell asleep on my shoulder during fireworks, the ring sitting in my sock drawer, bought on a lunchtime impulse 5 weeks earlier. Each memory felt like a billboard I had to pass, screaming at 70 miles an hour. By the time salt air started leaking through the vents, the sun was high and my hands ached from gripping the wheel. I pulled into the lot behind the Neptune Sands Motel, a 2-story relic with sun-bleached aqua doors. Her AirPods pinged from room 208. I killed the engine, locked my phone, and told myself I would wait. Just wait and see, because maybe there was a perfectly sane story inside that cracked stucco wall. I'm not proud of how long I sat there, counting the cracks in the asphalt like prayers. 20 minutes passed. Housekeeping carts rattled by, leaving trails of bleach and stale cigarettes. Through the thin curtains of 208, I saw movement, shadows stacking, unstacking. My palms sweated. I wiped them on the steering wheel. This, I told myself, was the point where ordinary people turned around, called a friend, screamed into a pillow. I opened the door instead. The metal staircase groaned under my sneakers. The closer I got, the louder I could hear the ocean and the thud of my heartbeat. I positioned myself against the rail opposite 208, pretending to scroll. A woman in a pink visor walked her pud past and gave me a polite nod. People mind their own business at seaside motels. 30 minutes after I arrived, the knob on 208 finally twisted. Jenny stepped out barefoot, her hair still damp, wearing a man's oversized white Oxford that skimmed the tops of her thighs. She rolled her shoulders the way she does when stretching after a workout, utterly at ease. Behind her, a guy my age, taller, broader, with a sunburn blossoming across his collarbones, followed, keys jangling. He laughed at something she whispered, and she laughed back, that open-mouthed Jenny laugh that once made me feel like the only star in the room. She reached for his hand as casually as breathing. I didn't feel rage. That surprised me. Instead, a quiet clarity settled, the kind people describe after a car spins on black ice and time slows. I watched them pad down the walkway, her bare feet leaving faint prints on sun-warmed concrete. The guy locked the door, draped an arm over her shoulders, and they descended the steps heading toward the vending machines, oblivious. They passed me at the landing. Jenny's eyes slid over my face, uncomprehending for a full second before shock widened them. The laugh died in her throat. The guy's arm fell. I nodded, almost polite, and said, "Forgot something in the room?" My voice sounded foreign but steady. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the stranger beside her, like he might supply a script. "I just want my question answered," I said. "Room 208, right?" She swallowed. "Chris, please." The guy stepped forward, maybe to crowd me, but I raised a hand. "Not here," I said. "Inside." He looked at her. She looked at the ground. They turned, and the three of us filed back up the stairs in silence, the gulls crying overhead like they were mocking us. Inside, the room smelled of sunscreen and cheap floral detergent. A single lamp burned. The unmade bed gaped open, sheets half pulled like a confession. He hovered by the door, arms folded, muscles flexing like he expected a swing that never came. I ignored him. My eyes stayed on Jenny, on the freckles I knew by zip code, on the necklace I bought her last Christmas now hanging sideways because the clasp had slipped to her collarbone. "Why?" I asked, the word barely more than breath. It sounded small against the hum of the air conditioner. She closed her eyes. Maybe she rehearsed excuses on the flight she never took. Maybe she thought I'd rage and give her a villain to point at. Instead, silence forced honesty. When she finally spoke, it was a whisper I felt as much as heard. "I loved you like a habit," she said, voice cracking. "And him, like myself. And I finally chose myself." The line landed with the soft brutality of snowfall. No apology, no bargaining, just a verdict. I waited for the sting, but again there was only that quiet clarity, as if every nerve had overloaded and then shut off to protect me. I nodded. The other guy shifted, unsure whether he'd just won or stepped into a lifeboat with a hole in it. I walked to the nightstand, spotted Jenny's AirPods, the little traitors that started all this. I picked them up, turned them over, then set them back exactly where they'd been. "Keep them," I said. "No more pings." I turned toward the door but paused. "I hope choosing yourself works out." It wasn't sarcasm, just a final full stop. The sunlight outside felt almost too bright. I took the stairs two at a time, heart strangely light, like someone had plucked out the stone I'd been carrying since yesterday. The sedan started on the first turn. I didn't look back until the motel was a receding blur in the rearview mirror. And even then it felt more like a place from a dream than somewhere I'd stood 15 minutes earlier. Traffic north was merciful. I hit the city limits by dusk, parked, and walked into the apartment Jenny and I had shared. The late light striped the living room in gold. On instinct, I reached for the couch pillow she loved, then let my hand drop. Some objects keep echoes. I showered, threw her half of the closet into boxes, and slid the ring, still in its velvet shell, into the back of the junk drawer where spare batteries go to be forgotten. That night I lay on the right side of our bed, out of muscle memory, listening to the ceiling fan. For the first time in 3 years, the dark wasn't crowded with what-ifs or calendars of future milestones. My body sank, unknotted, drifting on the simple fact that sometimes a door closes and the room breathes easier. I slept 8 hours straight. No dreams, no alarms, waking to a sunrise that felt new. Not because anything miraculous had happened, but because nothing false remained. Morning slid into mid-July like nothing had happened, the city already sweating by 8. I brewed coffee and put 2 mugs on the counter before remembering I didn't need the second anymore. Instead of dumping it, I carried the spare outside and left it on the stoop for whoever walked by first. Some tiny ritual of letting go I'd probably read about on a mindfulness blog. I told my boss I'd be working remote for a week, blaming a family situation, then pushed my laptop aside and tackled the apartment with the kind of focus usually reserved for finals week. Every drawer turned into an archaeological dig. Ticket stubs, Polaroids, her spare deodorant, 3 half-burned candles that still smelled like her favorite farmer's market lavender. I filled 2 trash bags and 1 donation box before noon, the place echoing in a way that felt both sad and breathable. Around lunch, my phone lit up with Jenny's name for the first time since the motel. I let it ring out. She tried twice more, then switched to text. "Can we talk? Just closure, please." I stared at the typing bubbles, the way they popped like tiny soap domes, then set the device face down. Part of me wanted every detail, wanted to sift through the rubble for a single piece of evidence, that it hadn't all been pointless. The saner part realized closure is just a prettier word for reopening the wound. I opened Spotify instead and built a playlist called Unscheduled Vacay. All the songs I'd saved but never played, because they weren't her style. Loud guitars filled the room, and the silence she'd left behind started cracking like old paint. The ring still sat in the junk drawer, velvet case wedged between batteries and takeout ketchup packets. I pocketed it, took the subway to Jewelers Row, and ducked into McKenna and Sons, where the guy in cufflinks had sold it to me with a handshake and a promise of lifetime upgrades. He recognized me, glanced at the small box, and winced in that professional, sorry for your loss way. Store policy said 30 days for a full refund. I was on day 33. He offered store credit instead. I almost laughed. What good was a future discount on something I never planned to need again? But the thought of carrying that stone back home felt heavier than accepting the compromise, so I signed the receipt. On my way out, a stranger bumped my shoulder. She muttered an apology, and because the universe has a dark sense of humor, I realized she was wearing the exact brand of shampoo Jenny used. The flash of scent punched memories forward, but instead of pain, there was just recognition, like seeing a childhood street on Google Maps. I kept walking. 2 blocks later, the phone buzzed with a voicemail icon. Instinct told me to delete it unheard. Curiosity pressed play. Jenny's voice was quiet, controlled. "Hey Chris, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm moving to Portland next month. I'll mail my key. I hope you find whatever peace looks like for you." There was a pause, and then the click of a line, gone dead. She hadn't said goodbye at the motel, but this felt close enough. I hit delete and turned the corner into sunlight. That evening, my buddy Matt dragged me to a Phillies game, certain that overpriced beer and yelling at umpires counted as therapy. 4th inning, he finally asked what happened. I gave him the condensed version. The app ping, the drive, the hallway, the line about loving herself. He whistled low. "Dude, that's brutal." Then he grinned, but also kinda metal. We laughed harder than the joke deserved. And for the first time I noticed how laughter can exist beside loss without canceling it out. Back in my apartment, I showered away the stadium grit and scrolled Reddit, landing in a thread called r/surviving infidelity. I hovered over the create post button, thumb trembling, then closed the app. Surviving felt right, but posting felt like draping my heart on a public clothesline. I wasn't ready for commentary. I was busy living the unedited draft. Sleep came easier again, no ceiling fan staring contest. I woke before the alarm, laced up running shoes buried since college, and jogged the Schuylkill River Trail while the skyline blushed pink. Motion steadied thoughts better than any podcast. Halfway through mile 3, my phone chimed. A single text from an unknown number. "She's not worth your peace, brother. Been where you are. If you ever need to talk, 555-0198. Derek." I slowed to a walk, heart hammering for more than exertion. Derek had to be the guy from the motel. How he got my number I could guess, Jenny's phone maybe, but why bother? Survivor's guilt? A flex? I tucked the phone away, deciding silence could answer for me. Yet curiosity scratched again by evening. I dialed, ready to hang up if he sounded smug. Instead, Derek's voice came quiet, almost nervous. "Chris? Look, I know this is weird. She told me you two were on a break. Guess that was a lie. I found her DMing another guy yesterday. I'm done. Just wanted to say you're not alone in getting played." The words landed like a second, smaller meteor, less destructive but widening the crater. We talked 15 minutes, sharing cliff notes of chaos, and hung up with an awkward take care man that felt genuine. I set the phone down and realized the apartment no longer smelled like Jenny's candles. It smelled like fresh paint from the window trim I'd touched up in the afternoon. The playlist hummed through Bluetooth speakers, the couch cushion molded to only me. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a detour from some prettier timeline. It felt like a blank street map waiting for me to pick a direction and start walking. 3 weeks later, my apartment felt less like a crime scene lockdown and more like a studio reboot. I'd painted one wall a reckless cobalt, something Jenny would have vetoed as too loud, and replaced our beige couch with a battered leather one I found on Facebook Marketplace. It smelled faintly of campfire. The previous owner said it had lived in a Catskills Airbnb and absorbed good energy. I didn't care if that was marketing fluff. It looked like a seat that belonged to somebody unafraid of spilled coffee or muddy boots, so I hauled it up 4 flights with Matt's help and tipped the delivery guys in pizza. Work was mercifully busy. I spent days stitching code for a logistics startup, breaking only for iced coffee runs and the occasional group chat with college friends who still assumed Jenny and I were solid. At first, I dodged the truth, offering bland statements. We're on different paths. Eventually, I typed out the whole Motel saga in one long message, hit send, muted the thread, and went for a run before anyone could lob pity grenades. When I got back, the chat had exploded with shock emojis and a chain of offers for weekend trips, beers, movie binges. I realized people can't help if you barricade every window. One Friday, Derek texted, hitting Asbury Park to clear my head. Surfboard on the roof. You in? I stared at the invite, weighing the weirdness of bonding with the guy who accidentally co-starred in my heartbreak. But curiosity overruled. We met in a Wawa parking lot at dawn, tossed my bag beside his cooler, and drove east with the radio low. Conversation came easier than expected. He was a freelance photographer, living gig to gig, collecting stories the way some people collect ticket stubs. By the time we hit the shore, he'd explained how he'd met Jenny at a mutual friend's barbecue and how her version of our relationship was complicated. The word tasted sour, but I let it go. The waves were small, forgiving, perfect for beginners. Derek coached me through my first standing ride. I wiped out spectacularly and surfaced laughing, salt stinging my eyes. Something about the ocean felt like shaking an Etch-a-Sketch. Old lines vanished under new water. That afternoon we sat on the sand, sunburn blooming, swapping playlists through a portable speaker. A girl a few towels over kept glancing our way, tattoos on her shoulders, reading Station 11. Derek nudged me. Your move, man. I almost shrugged it off, then walked over and asked how she liked the book. Her name was Maya, visiting from Baltimore, graphic designer, laugh like fizzing soda. We talked until the horizon blushed orange and her friends started packing up. She typed her number into my phone under Maya, book on the beach, and waved as she left, the hem of her yellow sundress snapping in the breeze. Driving home, Derek grinned. Feel different? Yeah, I said, lighter. He drummed the steering wheel. Funny how breathing gets easier once someone stops squeezing your lungs. I nodded, watching the reflection of passing streetlights crawl across the windshield. Back in Philly, I showered off sand, dropped onto the campfire couch, and opened a fresh note on my phone. Lines poured out, a rough retelling of everything since the Find My Ping, but threaded with the salt air clarity of the day. I posted it anonymously to our True Off My Chest, hit refresh, and watched comments flow in. Strangers offering solidarity, jokes, advice, their own motel moments. Instead of feeling exposed, I felt stitched into a wider fabric of people who'd been burned and walked away glowing rather than charred. Maya texted the next morning, headed to Philly next week for a client meeting. Coffee? I smiled at the screen, fingers hovering. Somewhere in Ohio, Jenny was packing for Portland, choosing herself. That was her story. Mine was turning the page, not tearing it out. I typed back, coffee sounds great. There's a place with reckless cobalt walls you'll love. Then I tucked the phone beside the campfire leather and opened the window. Summer air streamed in, warm and briny, as if the shore had followed me home, as if the world, loud, messy, unfinished, was inviting me to start writing the next scene before the paint was even dry.